press crew just in time to end Leroy's rant.
You missed it. It was good, too.
Leroy's rant. Leroy is always ranting. I'm the reason why we're banned. I'm saying.
Well, probably not the only reason.
I'm probably not the only reason why we're banned. I mean, there are a couple of white guys on the show. Oops, sorry.
Oh.
You know, because whenever you're white and you say anything about
noticed?
anything controversial, oh my gosh, you get banned.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
true.
That was a joke. That was meant to be a joke.
Oh, conservatives get banned.
Mm.
Yeah.
Not liberals.
Yeah.
So what do you guys say? I mean, I got lost. I was like last week, went through a bunch of news stories, and I'm like, oh man, I've got like only like one thing left in here now. This week I've got 15 things I like printed out, and just some crazy stuff. And
Oh, man. Did you see the Brown discussion that we had last week about Brown is kind of making the news.
the lady did the study.
Littman.
That had it, I guess, taken down. I guess
Challenged. But
Yeah.
but the thing that
Brown
I didn't
University?
the thing that I didn't know is that it was already
Remind me of Crocker, because although he talked about it, I think he slept in it.
Yes, he did. Well, this article is this research project, this paper, which was written and it had already gone through peer review. So it already went through peer review, and Brown touted it as this great breakthrough research until their religious social activists, which is really religion. Social activism is really a religious movement. Began to force Brown to take it down because
I had an article on this. Right?
Yeah, it went against some deeply held beliefs. So some of the findings in the study, and this is, I won't give you the statistics, I'll just give you the general flow of the findings. The first finding was that if your child has more than one friend who was a transgender, the likelihood of your child suffering from what's called rapid onset transgenderism is 62%, and that goes up the more.
I have a couple of those stats because this is another article because like you said, it's been a lot more coming out about this. Keep going on, and it says ideologies try to suppress the study, but it says here the gal says, look, this is such a new thing. Anytime you have such something new, that's a shift in the culture, you don't know. You have to ask questions. That was just her thing. She's not opposed to anything or whatever.
She's not opposed to transgenderism herself. She's just
saying
bringing out the
understand
facts.
what this is. So she said, since little is known about such rapid onset gender dysphoria, the first step for researchers is to decide to describe it and introduce topics for future inquiry. That's all. Just going to describe it. What topics should we talk about? That was her goal.
Wow.
So Dr. Littman surveyed 256 patients who she found online, surveyed a bunch of questions. Now here's some of the stats. Nearly 70% of teenagers belonged to a peer group in which at least one friend had also come out as transgender. In some groups, the majority had done so. Nearly 65% of teens had spent an increased amount of time online and on social media, and parents reported that pro-transgender YouTube videos and blogs might have been influential.
Mm-hmm.
Declaring oneself transgender carried social benefits for these groups. Nearly 60% said the announcement brought a popularity boost. Being trans...
That's a new statistic there.
Being trans is a gold star in the eyes of other teens, one parent wrote.
What's fascinating about it is, and this is kind of like the bottom line of it, what they found is that once a person has imbibed the transgender rhetoric, logic, and thinking, it is unlikely, they're unlikely to be changed by anyone else because they believe that the transgender view is more authoritative than any countervailing views, number one. Number two, it frightened a lot of parents who have children who are transgender. And you can imagine if you're a person that's in the transgender movement and you've been fighting for, prominence or status, and then all of a sudden a study like this comes out and parents are like saying, look, if my child has friends who are of that persuasion, I'm not going to allow my kid to have friends who are of that persuasion. Because what it proves is that they are very effective recruiters. So,
I think it's like anything. I think that when you go through a crisis of identity and who am I, and that's maybe a normal part of growing up kind of process.
Sure.
Everyone what kind of person am I going to be? The choice I'm going to kind of make. When you're confused about stuff or you have issues, and I'm not talking about like deep psychological issues or problems. I'm just saying just normal life. You look to what's your framework that to resolve that
Right.
problem.
Right.
And this study seems to be common sense that if they're surrounded by a group that says, "Oh, I have this struggle. Here's how I resolved it by declaring transgender," saying,
Mhm.
"Well, maybe that will solve my
Mhm.
whatever I'm going through in my life." And so it just seems to me that that's sort of common sense that
Yeah.
people pick the worldview that dominates, the worldview that gives you the resolution to the, the difficulties, the feelings, whatever, and it also gives you status.
And that's that part of status. I mean, which is new, is also fascinating because it's a larger cultural shift where status is conferred to the best, the greatest and highest victim, right? That's one way to gain status. Another way to gain status is to be the one who protects the victim.
Yeah.
So both of those are status conferring, choices that people make, and neither of them in today's culture are considered, bad. You're either the protector of those who are in victim status, or you're the victim. So if you're a parent and you're seeing your child be, possibly susceptible to these things, there's got to be like radical panic, for that. So they suppressed the study for that reason. They didn't suppress the study because of its content or its research, bona fides, because it went through peer review already.
Right.
It had gone through peer review.
Yeah,
now they're going to subject it to a more rigorous and more socially acceptable peer review.
Well, biblically speaking, this is basically who you hang out with.
Yeah.
We say
Proverbs talk about that kind of stuff.
Birds of a feather flock together.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's
who you hang out.
Eugene Peterson translation.
No, that's the 49th and Woodland Avenue, Philadelphia translation.
But you are influenced, yeah.
Basically, the more immorality corrupts good character. Basically, bad company corrupts good character.
Yeah.
And this is taken on a whole new level. But it's a truism, and you can corrupt people through the social through social. This is social media, which is so much more prolific, and people are looking to be affirmed, very pervasive, be affirmed, and they don't want to be on the outside. The peer pressure is incredible. The desire for acceptance between everybody is just so much there. Even as adults, people still live that out as adults, and you've met people who are still in their teen years, even as they're in their 20s or 30s, and it's pretty
yeah. Here's
sad.
Here's a case that illustrates some of that stuff. I came across this one this week, so I won't read the headline. I'll just kind of start reading the story, and then it'll kind of reveal it. Say Britain's first gender fluid family, who sparked national debate because son, whose name is Starcloud, that's his name, Starcloud. I guess Starcloud. Yeah, I don't know if that's his last name. Starcloud.
Is that one word or two?
2 words.
Okay.
Starcloud. Starcloud is being brought up as a person rather than a boy. And he's preparing, and the couple now is preparing for a total transformation. Parents Louise and Nikki Draven, who told their unusual story to the Sunday Mirror last year, are set to undergo gender reassignment surgery. Dad, Louise, 32, whom Star calls Mummy, is to become a woman. Mom Nikki, 31, called a daddy by the child, is set to become Charlie. So basically,
hold up. But what's really cool?
So the husband and wife are both getting gender reassignment,
but they're really not.
Or are they doing that because their kid identifies them that way?
No, but this is
the kid. No, they're just doing it because they're on. That's just.
I think we talked about this last week, and what's fascinating is where we get lost in the weeds, like that he is becoming a she, which is like can't happen actually.
Yeah.
It's really, they're not really changing. They're still within the same binary categories. They're still either or.
Right. Yeah. Well, why not? Yeah. Why not infinitude? Why not?
Yeah. There's no. They're not. See, this is
the binary. Yes.
They're not becoming like. I can't even think of a word. They're not becoming,
non-male, non-female,
and was it androgynous? They're not. They're not pursuing androgyny, which would be,
No, they're still pursuing a binary.
Pursuing a binary.
Gender is binary.
Yeah. So they're not. So and that's the thing is, we're not these people. These people are not like logical. They're not like pursuing some like reason. There's not reason involved. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of felt needs that are being satisfied.
That's what I thought was interesting about a couple of little quotes I have from them here that ties into what you guys were just talking about, especially like the peer pressure side, but also just the want of to reconcile things, but in the emotional side. So Louise said of the swap op, that's the swap operation.
Well, why not just have parts of each gender then? Anyway, they're going to
maybe I don't know. Maybe that's an idea.
That's another one. Go for it.
She said this.
You do that.
I have doubts all the time, but that's just part and parcel of my transition. No one chooses these feelings, but when people do, they need the outside of their bodies to match the inside.
Okay. Emotions dictate ontology.
Yeah. And isn't that fascinating? She said, I have doubts all the time. In other words,
or
there's
Trump,
not a confidence.
They trump ontology. They don't even determine it.
Yeah.
They trump ontology.
Not Donald Trump, but actually the card playing. I'm just clarifying because that's a trigger word.
That's a trigger word.
So when you play games like Pinochle, there's no Trump card.
There's no
Trump
card.
It's called the Pelosi card.
Yeah. But no, you're saying the feelings override.
Yeah, we go.
That for those who aren't political.
But even then, the feelings.
I have doubts all the time. Think about what she's saying there. It's like I don't know if this is the right thing, but I've had these feelings that I can't reconcile other ways, and so I'm told by the society this will help me. This is just the way you're supposed to do it. Mm-hmm. That's what I hear. Is that I'm confused. I have a lot of confusion. I don't know. Maybe I should do it or not. I'm not convinced. But this is the way I'm supposed to react when I have these doubts. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what the study says. And that's why I think it's a common sense study, because I think it's borne out in all these stories so far. Yeah.
The crazy thing is, I've thought about it in terms of, the government coming along and saying to us that we have to use these pronouns.
Yeah.
Or to address people in a particular way. And when the government does that, the government is literally saying to us that the laws of logic no longer applies and naked authority and power are the rule. And because you need to suspend logic and reason in order to accommodate that particular view. You would have to. You would have to say that is and is no longer means what it means. It's just a maddening time, and no one knows what the long-term ramifications of any of these decisions will be. No one knows how perversely or whether it'll even profit society. We're just told to.
Well, I think there are reports showing that there's more harm done.
Well, I know that, but I'm just saying.
But it's still very new.
Right. I'm sure that it is. I mean, it's going against nature.
Yeah.
So. So
check out this other quote. She says, I was never happy about having periods or growing breasts. I felt all wrong. So I did some soul searching and realized I've always wanted to be a male. Last year he revealed he was pansexual. Some days, he being that was the one who started with a woman that's going to, so they're calling him he now in the story, just to track where that's going. Last year he revealed he's pansexual. Some days he would dress as a woman and others as a man. Now he only ever dresses as a man and binds his breasts every day. This couple say that the star cloud, the sun, the person, child, son, is still gender neutral and is happy and well adjusted.
Sure.
Based on what standard?
Well, that's the confusion of all this stuff. Is like, I have a blog post that I wrote years ago, and I think we talked about it before. It's like. People that have want to get rid of their arms or legs or limbs because I just don't feel right about owning.
One girl wanted to go blind. And she literally blinded herself
because the doctors wouldn't help her.
Yes.
So she poured Clorox or something in her eyes. I know one person poured Clorox. One other person, they tried to cut off their own arm because they just felt like that wasn't them. They didn't feel like a person who should have an arm. But no one would help, so they started to do it themselves, and the EMS came and had to finish the job, through doctors because
it's so much damage.
Yeah. Right. But that was the goal, is to do so much damage that they were forced medically to do what they wanted. And that's what I kind of, when I read this, it's the same thing. It's like I never was happy about my period or my breast. It's like there's a disconnect there about physically who your DNA has made you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a naturalist, Darwinian evolutionist, you'd have to say that there's some sort of malfunction in the DNA.
Well, just from a purely naturalist standpoint, you would have to say that these people are self-eradicating themselves there because they cannot propagate the species because the whole point is to propagate the species.
Well, they can't because they started off male female. They're just
right,
switching.
And now they're doing damage to themselves, so they can no longer propagate the species.
With
so
the surgeries.
So what I'm getting at is the whole
right, but it can't be immoral.
On naturalism. Well, on naturalism, it can't be.
It can't be immoral.
Yeah,
it's just what is.
Exactly.
So and the interesting thing is, no one should be upset about it. As a matter of fact, if I were to stand here and just start, lacing, with, anti-homosexual epithets, I would never do that. No one should ever be mad at me that does not ascribe to a Christian worldview. You should never be mad at me. I mean, I didn't do anything immoral. There's no such thing as morality on that view. So,
well, the thing about that I want to talk about is how did the emotions and why do the emotions become such the ruling factor? What's going on, and what is we as Christians? How do we deal with that? Because our kids, our youth, they're being affected by this too.
Yeah,
we need to do more than just go, wow, that's
insane.
Absolutely,
that's wrong.
It is emotionally and even mentally whacked or problematic. But our youth are being affected here. Emotions are taking over as far as the Trump as the dominant,
the overriding,
as the president of our lives,
as the leader of the GOP of our lives. But it's a good that's a good question. It's so funny that we're talking about this because when I'm going to drive home, I listen to whatever I can get, because I just can't take the mindless driving every day. So some kid that I used to coach in high school football, puts this thing out on his page, and it was about a rap beef with Eminem and this other guy. So I don't generally pay attention to that stuff because who has time? So I just was driving and I listened to it, and then what I did was I started to listen to all the so-called reaction videos about it because there was many reaction videos. But what's really fascinated me is the desire in these videos to be as disrespectful. You only get style points for being super disrespectful. You only get style points for
the biggest burn, the
biggest burn, or just trashing someone's daughter or their wife or their girlfriend.
Yeah.
Or belittling.
ESPN did the same thing. I heard they were doing this radio show and they were talking about just a casual issue of some quarterback or whatever, some issue, and they were only going to read here's a couple of things, but we're going to give the award to the most offensive response we get, and they were pulling out the ones that just intentionally doing that. But there's that within the culture that's satisfying. I think that emotive, feelings based thing, which is Ward's question is how do we work with our kids? And for us, one of the things we try to do is we do our we haven't had one real recently, but we do our apologetics Tuesdays or Taco Tuesdays, with the kids, and we'll sit down and talk about these issues and try to help them see that, why are they deciding? Why do people decide all these things? Whether it's about rap videos or more serious issues of gender identity or race issues and whatever, and trying to show them how when their feelings are used to determine the reality, there's always a conflict that comes place. Because what if their feelings are different than yours? Then who decides? And try to get them to think through that process. And well, gosh, then if I wouldn't want their feelings to determine I'm a racist or I'm a homophobe, if I wouldn't, then maybe my feelings shouldn't determine stuff about my friends and how my friends react.
Or even about yourself.
Or even about myself.
The thing that's crazy about it is, as I
try to get them to think through that.
As I watch these videos, I started thinking to myself, how do you penetrate this ethos? Because that's exactly what it is. It is a very strong, sensate ethic, a way of seeing the world that dominates young people's minds today, and some older people's minds today. And you wonder. I mean, and as I was thinking about it, I was like, man, this is difficult. I mean, I don't want to say it's more difficult than the first century apostles having to reach Rome, but at least they and Rome had shared some common features. That's a matter of fact. That's why they
sense in some ways.
That's how they overcame. That's how they overcame is their sense of duty and responsibility. The Romans ultimately saw kinship with the Christians being willing to die for what they believed, which was exactly what they were willing to die in their own sense of duty. So there was some kinship there. With this ethic that we are dealing with, I mean, there's an ontological kinship, if you will, that we have because we share the same world that they do. We're subject to the same constraints and restraints that they have. But how do we penetrate it in such a way that they can see that there's truck with us?
I think that that's the idea of finding that touch point. It's very Francis Schaeffer of you to go for that.
Schaefferian.
Very Schaefferian of you to do that. But I can tell you've been reading lately. But I think what comes out, and Ward mentioned this about the emotions determining ontology type thing, is that I think what this ultimately gets at is it's a rejection of the monist or emergent human nature that's inherent to naturalism. So in other words, the idea that, we're only pure physical beings and any emotions or stuff are just a result of our DNA, that they sort of emerge.
Or they aid us in surviving.
It rejects the sort of any kind of dualism that it's a physicalism that dominates culture. But if you look at what is inherent in these transgender things, especially, is that I think if you're having a conversation, is yes, we don't want emotions to control our life, but ultimately what they are recognizing is that my feelings are not aligned with the physical. They are acknowledging a dualist nature of who they are. Mm-hmm. Now, they're confused about that dualist nature, probably because they have a naturalistic framework and they don't know how to manage it, so I've got to do these sort of things. But that might be part of that inroad.
But because if they're acknowledging a distinction between their inner selves and their outer selves, then obviously they are dualists.
Yeah. So
they're not saying that they're one.
It's almost a hint of Gnosticism where the physical doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's what they've turned it into. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Not that it's denying the physical.
Not that it's full blown Gnosticism.
Right. No, but it's a matter of your feelings or your emotions or what you think.
Yeah.
But, the feelings and emotions trump overrides.
Yeah.
Or is more significant than reality. And there seems to be along the way. There seems to be a deadening to truth. Mm-hmm. While the emotions go up, it's like people are coming callous to truth, or just if you're talking about truth, they're like, "What is that?" And it doesn't matter.
Well, it's all my truth.
Well, yeah, but the truth it almost has to be emotional.
Yeah,
you almost have to feel it. If you can't feel the truth, if it doesn't conjure up emotions,
yes, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Then it's not. So it's an emotionally based or related truth, and if it doesn't have the emotion to it, it's like, who cares? Yeah. So facts. This is the boredom in the classroom.
But to relate it to another issue, just to relate to another issue not related with so controversial. Say this. Right. Look at. I'll just pick on Hollywood marriages for a minute. It could be any marriage, but I'll just pick on that because it's an easy example.
Right.
The stars that, they're married, they go and they do a movie, and all of a sudden you find out, within a year, they divorced their spouse.
And they're with the new movie
They're
person.
with their co-star of that movie, and then they're with them, and it's new, and then the newness wears off, the passion wears off. You look at Hollywood movies in general, love is always passion. It's not commitment and devotion, it's passion.
Right.
It's emotionalism. And so we've done that in marriage across the spectrum. Again, Hollywood's just the easy example, but I think a lot of marriages do it where they say, well, I no longer feel the same way as when I first saw. I remember those days. And they turn marriage into the emotion. And when the emotion is gone, they assume that the marriage and love is over.
It's very...
because of that. So I think that illustrates kind of...
No, you're right. I think you're right, because if we were to articulate an accurate depiction of a man or a woman functioning in reality, when we say accurate, I mean obviously one as God intends, that person would be in tune with the Lord, they be in tune with themselves in the sense that they recognize their flawed nature, and that everything that they believe about themselves is not necessarily true, and they need to define themselves as God sees them. And that being said, their function in society would flow out of that identity. Their function in society would flow out of that identity, recognizing their fallenness and being willing to accept the fallenness of others. And then their ability to cope in that society would also be as a result of that, recognizing that identity and then living out in accord with those dictates. So they would be a totally different type of person in all of their relationships. They literally would be. But what we have is, and I think this gets to the point that you guys were making, what we have is we're having people who are not whole in their identity. They're fragmented in their identity. They're fragmented in their knowledge of who they are, and they're fragmented in all their relationships. And the dysfunction that we see in their expression toward the world is a result of that fragmentation, of that lack of wholeness, a lack of cohesiveness. I think that's exactly, and that's why we see the dysfunction. I got to cut my arm off because it's not me, or I need to change, my sexuality, if you could ever do such a thing, because it's not what I feel like. It's because at some point, their brokenness is really having or holding the trump card over their life.
Yeah, and they're looking for a way to reconcile that brokenness.
Right.
And that's the way the world's giving. That's the option that they have.
Right.
So I don't feel, I feel a certain compassion or a sorrow for those people who are trapped. Those people who are trapped.
Christians have had enough in Christendom. Yeah, compassion or sorrow for them.
Yeah. And I think that'd be a big danger. Like, people listen here, when we talk about these things, I think there's an automatic assumption that it's just a condemnation.
Right.
That's not the intent of all this.
Right. No.
The critique isn't condemnation.
Right. I think what we do
that goes with the
right. I think that what we do is we attack ideas more than we attack people.
But I think on that, if we don't come up with solutions or address what they're going through, it won't seem like a solution. It'll seem more like an attack.
Condemnation.
Exactly. So I'm not sure that in Christianity we have, as a whole, done a really good job on, I want to call it a theology of the emotions, for the lack of a better. What role the emotions, but we just don't do that. It's not very good.
A lot of times it's dismissive of emotions, and that shouldn't be our
response. Fully embracing as some charismatic type movements. Or they highlight, the emotional side of feeling and stuff like that. And we don't do a good job of approaching either. Yeah. So, this whole issue has helped actually impacted how I'm raising my kids as well. As they're 3 and 4, and I have distinct conversations with them. It's like, okay, your emotions, just because you want something doesn't make it right. Okay. So I really highlight where the emotions come in. I'm trying to get black and white from that age where, what's true matters more than how we feel. And so I go to distinct lengths for that.
Parents do not do kids any service by giving in to those moments when they're young.
Right.
Yes. I knew that when my kids were little, I knew that, man, if I give into this now, it's going to be worse tomorrow. So I'm going to put up with whatever tantrums they throw now or do whatever, but I'm not going to give in because I know it's not right. And
an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly what we're left with. Yeah. So I think, if you look at all of these things, because you talk about how do we do it with the kids, is that making sure from, 1, 2 years old, 3 years old, as early as possible, not allowing your child's emotions to dictate the reality of your family life, to dictate the reality of consequences or punishments or blessings, good things you give them. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to give you this cookie just because you cry. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, because you cried, there's less likely to do it for you, because that's you need to learn this is not how we get things that you want. You give me a reason. You give me, ask them to give you ideas or reasons, not just emotional meltdowns. And so I think from the because you can do that with any age. You don't have to talk about transgender issues to get across the idea that emotions are not the driver.
Any age.
They're valuable.
We do it with Corey. Now, all the time.
I know. I could tell you. Listen, I could tell you the latest Corey story.
Corey story.
The latest
we get Corey story hour.
Corey story minute. The latest Corey story, and you know what I'm talking about, Corey. I can just roll you under the bus right now.
He told me today, he said, I'm going to have to start listening again because he pretends like he doesn't watch it anymore.
Right.
But he's I'm going to start listening again. But you guys are so boring. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because we don't fight with each other. He wants us to fight with each other.
He wants us to fight with each other. If that is like the only way you can have a good story.
Well, he just assumes because we disagree with him about so much.
Yes.
That we disagree with each other.
Listen. I could go in right now, but Corey, you are so lucky. You are so lucky. You're as much as we hate on you, you're our friend. So we're going to let you live today.
Well, I think if we talk about these issues, societal solutions, identity, who they are, there's an identity confusion, but there's also a moral confusion that has to be addressed. But it's not just in the secular world.
Right.
It's in the church as well.
In the church world.
So I want to look at the story real quick of what's going on with the Roman Catholic Church and the pedophilia stuff. Before I do that, just look at this final story about why these issues matter. There's this headline from the UK. Male rapist who identified as female transfers to women's jail. Assaults females. That's the headline of the story.
A rapist.
It says a biologically male rapist who identified as a woman has been accused of sexually assaulting 4 female inmates shortly after being transferred to the all-female facility. Stephen Wood, 52-year-old man and convicted sex offender and pedophile, who now goes by the name Karen, while he pled guilty to raping one woman in 2003 and another in 2016. He began identifying female. They moved him into the prison, and then he sexually assaulted these women. Following the incidents, by the way, they transferred him back to a male facility. And the people said, hey, we're sorry. It was the thing. But when there's a lack of clarity for these things, you say, what's the effect? Well, we know the short-term effect is not good, and we know the long-term may not be better.
And that shows that it doesn't, the issues do not just affect the individual.
Exactly, because it's not his feelings.
Not just, that's the law. They always say, it was just them. Who are you to? It's not just that person. It's almost never just that person.
And it shows that females can be sexual assaulters too.
Yeah.
She's a female. See what I did there?
So it's like the most insane thing that I've ever heard in my entire life.
Yeah.
What was he going to do
when
you put him in jail with a bunch of women?
Who's he's raped before?
What was he going to do? Catch me out?
They can't get out.
But he transitioned to woman, so now he's safe because he won't harm anybody. I'm serious.
He didn't transition.
Well, if that's the case, then how can you even hold him accountable for rape
and send him back to man? Right. Well, that's
tough.
Technically, that's not. You can't.
But still, I mean, I was a man.
Those things maybe have. Anyway, so let's go to the Roman Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Let's not.
Let's not.
I'll beat you to it.
So here's the headline, and Leroy and I showed this story to Leroy because I hadn't confirmed yet. I heard the headline. I'm like, this cannot be true.
Right.
This has to be like
it's got to be like a lie or taken out of context. But it's true.
Do you want the headline? We did. We were in his office yesterday and confirmed.
Apparently, I don't. But
here's the headline: Archbishop, quote, "I wasn't sure if it was a crime for priests to rape children." And you think, okay, that's
taken out of context.
That can't be what he said.
Right?
Yeah.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
He gave it as part of his deposition.
Wow.
So here it is. Because he looked up the deposition and actually the transcript, and I was like, okay, that's what it said. So it says this: high-ranking head of the Archdiocese of St. Louis, Archbishop Robert Carlson, said under oath that he wasn't sure if he knew that it was illegal for priests to have sex with children. So when we read that, I said, oh, well, that's not the headline. That's different. He's saying if it wasn't sure.
Right, because
he wasn't admitting that protecting, might not be, he didn't know if it was illegal for him to
have to report.
So that's a reporting question.
So he didn't, and look, in some sliver of a way, in some tiny sliver of a way, you can see how someone may be sure. If someone comes to you and they confess, this, what do I need to do from this point? You need to know what the law states. And if you don't know what the law states, then you can, even though you're ignorant, it doesn't excuse you. I'm just saying.
Yeah, mandatory reporting today is not what was the law in terms of mandatory reporting.
Years ago.
What he's trying to do is equivocate a little bit on that. It's like, well, I didn't know I had to report it. I didn't know that was against the law.
And see, he has a very if that were the argument, he would have a very sliver of a point. If that were the argument, but that is not the argument.
No.
Yeah. So after admitting to protecting and covering up pedophile priests, this is what he said: I wasn't sure I had to report it. I wasn't even sure it was a crime. Carlson testified that he wasn't sure whether it was a crime for a priest to rape children when he served as chancellor of the Twin Cities Archdiocese in 1980. Well, I just didn't know it was a crime for a man to rape little children. That's what he said.
It's his job to know. But anyway, go ahead.
Well,
but this is common sense. Oh.
But again, frame this. This is somebody who is supposed to be a priest that has some
trust,
understanding of God's law and morality and truth.
Yeah.
Whether he knew it was illegal or not,
it's irrelevant.
Why would you not
report
it? Dude, that's not cool. You got to go to jail. I got to report this guy. And if it's not illegal, it needs to be illegal. Then you'd become a stalwart.
And you can see how back in 1980, where people would come in, and there was the whole deal about vows. When a person would come into the confessional and confess their sins, you were supposed to keep their confidence. You know what I mean? As I was a kid, I remember all the movies and all the law talk that you couldn't share what went on in the confessionals. So I could see in 1980 where there's a sliver of that. But when a guy is a priest who is doing what he's doing, you got to get him up out of there. You got to call the police. He's got to go to jail.
Here's what goes on. So it does get to the headline here. Attorney Jeff Anderson asked Carlson if he was aware that it was a crime for an adult to engage in sex with a child. His response, the Catholic priest his response was, "I'm not sure whether I knew it was a crime or not." Carlson replied, I understand today that it's a crime. Anderson asked Carlson if he knew in 1984, when he was an auxiliary bishop in the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minnesota, that it was a crime to have sex with a child. Again, he says, quote, "I'm not sure if I did or didn't," Carlson said. "I didn't know if it was a crime or not." Now, so that's what they did. So in other words, I didn't know it was a crime. I didn't know if it was wrong to rape a child. I didn't know it was a crime.
Yeah, that's insanity.
Therefore, the idea was to cover up.
That's insane.
Now, you might think, okay, that's just one wacky priest.
No, hold on.
Yeah.
If it's not a crime, if there's not a problem, why cover up?
There you go. And that's, I think, the thing. Well, because the priests that did it violated their vows of celibacy, but that's only a violation of their vows. That's a crime against the church, not a crime against the nature of the children.
And clearly telling the church didn't do a whole lot of good for the most part. Yeah. A lot of them. But go ahead.
Well, that's because for them, and this story from the Pope that just happened, I think, tells us why he's testifying this way. Why he's wiggling, the definition of the word is kind of thing, and massaging his word. Well, I don't think I knew then. I just
that's called evasive
language. Because the goal is to protect not the children, but to protect the institution of the Roman Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Here's what the Pope says. Pope Francis broke his silence on Tuesday. This is on September 12th. After offering a stinging condemnation, not of the predators or the bishops who cover for them, but of the accusers, fashioning the poor bishops as the victim of this saga. Here's what he said. No. In these times, it seems like, quote unquote, the great accuser, which is Satan, has been unchained and is attacking the bishops. True, we are all sinners, we bishops. He tries to uncover the sin. He tries to uncover the sins so that they are visible in order to scandalize the people. The great accuser, as he himself says to God in the first chapter of the book of Job, roams the earth looking for someone to accuse. Last Sunday, the Pope said that silence is the way to respond, quote, to people who seek only scandal, with those who look only for division, who want only destruction. End quote. Likening himself to Jesus, the Pope insisted that Christ defeated, quote, the wild dogs by refusing to respond to them.
So he called the victims the wild dogs. Are you kidding me?
Well, hold on.
The victims are cooperating with Satan.
Yeah. But if this is how they're wired, it can't be immoral.
That's exactly the issue that you get between these. If you kind of synthesize these two testimonies,
exactly. Well, between the transgender and homosexuality, that's how they feel.
Yeah.
So it's not wrong. So how is it wrong on their account for pedophilia to be, because some people want to legalize pedophilia? This can't possibly be wrong unless you have an objective moral standard, independent from it. So you can't object to this. unless there is a divine moral standard by which to measure it by.
Yeah, and the Roman Catholic Church clearly lacks that divine moral standard. Because what they've said between those two people is, well, I didn't know it was a law or not. If it's not illegal, then I have no need to report those people. My primary duty is protect the bishops and priests who rape the little children.
Which is telling because, and I haven't looked into it, which is telling on the count of, well, if that's the case, does not the Catholic Church have a law or rule against it and for discipline? And if it doesn't, because they've been shuffled around. I know they were shuffled around a lot.
Yeah, they moved them to other parishes.
Well, then that, regardless of the law, that is a horrific moral black mark against the Catholic Church.
Yeah, they didn't defrock these people.
Oh, they didn't.
They just moved them to new places
for new vindication.
Well,
in some cases, they've elevated them to higher offices.
What's the problem is the guy, the nuncio, his name is Vigano, who brought the 11-page indictment against the current pope, said that he personally, with corroboration, brought a dossier to the Pope on one of the particular cardinals.
Was it the Steele dossier?
Not the Steele. They wish this one was stolen. But they brought a dossier on on a Cardinal McCarrick. The previous Pope had benched him, said that you are not allowed to go in public and offer prayers, and you're not allowed to travel. So the previous Pope benched him, put him out to pasture. Said you need to live a life of penance and prayer.
He didn't defrock him. He
didn't
put him on the sideline.
Which is what they do. Once the new pope came in, he immediately took him off the bench, despite the warnings and protestations of Vigano. And what this guy did, his name was McCarrick. And what he did is he resumed his old habits, and he began to seed the pope's inner circle with people in the Lavender Mafia, as they call them. They began to seed these people in and through the Catholic Church because that was the job that he was given. So he put more people who are favorable to the Pope's view in positions of power. So I read in an article that many staunch Catholics are calling for a reformation. And I was I sat back in my chair when I read that because, I mean, think about what that means. Think about what that would mean. I mean, would the faithful Catholics separate from the Pope?
No, and that's part of the thing that's disconcerting in my explorations of this, because some of these stories came across through a guy on Facebook that I'm connected with and who's a part of the Roman Catholic Church, and he was posting something on, is it okay to hold hands during this certain prayer that goes on in the church, and it's not because that's not appropriate. And I'm like, and I kind of said on the comment, I was like, well, if they had those sort of strict standards about holding hands in prayer, I mean, why don't they have those standards for like priests with little boys? I mean, why is this?
Sure.
So I got called a troll, and one guy told me explicitly, "I hope you slit your wrists and die." Devout Roman Catholic response that was, and the guy who started the thread never intervened and said, "Hey, this is inappropriate." That's just sort of whatever.
No, he probably thought you got what you deserve. Yeah.
But in another thread that's come up with these, another guy kept saying, "Oh, this is terrible that, the Holy Father should not say these things, because that's the title of he's the Holy Father." And I asked him, I said, look, as kindly as I could, I said, look, I'm not trying to antagonize it. I just honestly want to understand. I'm confused. You're acknowledging that the Pope has worked to conceal these people, protect pedophiles, and that he's done all these things. You acknowledge all these things he's done. Why do you still call him Holy Father? I was like, well, because he's the vicar of Christ, and so I just know he needs to repent and come to this. I was like, and I said, okay, fine. I didn't take it any further, but I'm saying he's not holy. He's showing himself reprobate. I mean, he's calling the people that are exposing the sin of these people, of the priests and bishops that they've protected. He's calling them Satan because they have not confessed their sin. They have not sought repentance for that sin. They've sought to conceal and hide it. But so I don't know what sort of reformation may or may not take place, but by the, unscientific survey, by all the comments that I've read, it's sort of like, well, this is bad, but we need to support the Pope and everything's still, let's back the system as it is. I don't know what to, and one person even took one of these stories and said, well, that's such an old story. I'm like, it's only a month like the testimony that guy gave is like a month old, and the story is just reported today. He's like, yes, but there's so many new things coming out all the time. Like,
they're all negative.
So what if it's new or not?
Right,
he still said what he said.
Right.
I mean, but so there's all these justifications.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of just devotion to the institution over the individual.
This is the blind part of some faith and commitments that people have, and why a lot of people would look at it and go, why we would want this?
Yeah.
What is there about this? If Roman Catholicism is correct way as established through the vicar of Christ, the Holy Father, what is there to attract anyone to that? How is that a moral high ground or a moral improvement? I wouldn't want my kids going to I wouldn't trust. I'm sure there's a lot of wonderful, trustworthy priests out there, and they would lay their life down in a second for some kids. Don't know which ones they are or aren't, because the Catholic Church has gone out of its way to hide them. Yeah. To hide the bad ones.
Shuffle them out of town. Right. Shuffle them from parish to parish before they get found out.
And you might
put them out the pasture and then bring them back when people aren't thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Go ahead.
I was just saying they sound like a bunch of gangsters rather than holy men. They do. I mean, they are espousing there's this to me
on a position of power, not privilege.
To me, this is the extension of the leadership in the church not being tethered to the Word of God and not being tethered to God Himself. Because if you were tethered to the Word of God and tethered to God Himself, you wouldn't go around and destroying the victims or equating the victims to Satan. You would really be seeking healing and honesty and transparency, because you know that these are souls that God loves. But to go and claim that they're the ones who are at fault for, many of them were young kids when this stuff happened to them, is insane.
Yeah.
It's insane.
And actually that quote goes on, they talk about in some of how basically the idea that, well, some of these people aren't innocent themselves, they've done things wrong too. And, so it's quite tragic. But you guys both bring up, I think this is the important thing, is how is the church different? That's the question we have to ask ourselves as Christians, as believers. How are we distinguishing ourselves? Because I mean, you can look at what they've done to children and sexualizing children there. I got this story out of China. They have these kids who are 5. You can see, I'm not going to see the little pictures. These little 5-year-old girls dressed up in Victoria's Secret lingerie, the angel wings and the stuff like the current model is. And they were at a shopping mall in Chengdu, China, Chengdu City in southwest China, and they were just on these walking the catwalk in wings and just doing the like Victoria's Secret models, walking down, sexualizing children. So if you're in a world that you're struggling to find identity, you're struggling to find hope, you see the secular world is sexualizing children, and then confusing them about their sex, and then you look to the Roman Catholic Church,
and they're sexually
abusing and sexualizing.
Some of them
children.
are, yeah.
And there's even been a few evangelical Protestant churches in the last year that came out. A couple big names last year that came out that they had issues of sexual predation in the church, and they hid it and concealed it. Because well, here's the thing is, and here's what I would say is, like, this is what we have to do if we're going to separate ourselves.
I was going to ask you about our church leadership and stuff. Go ahead.
Because the Protestant church isn't centralized, it's a little different approach. Right. But I think one of the issues, the marks that must distinguish us as a people, is that we say, look, we serve a God and we serve a Christ who cares about us as individuals more than the organization. Mm-hmm. If you look at old things like Aquinas and different moral theorists, when they talk about law and politics, it all began with natural law. It began with the individual. I have rights by nature, by who I am. And, I sort of pass over some of those temporarily to governments or institutions by consent, but they can't abuse those rights. And if they do, I because they're my natural right, I can withdraw that consent to those organizations, and then they no longer have authority over me. And so that goes to governments, but also goes to churches as institutions. If an institution has proven itself more concerned about the institution than the dignity and sacredness of the individual, then that institution is no longer valid. Mm-hmm. And so we have to, whether it's if you're a local or gathering and your pastor or elder, whoever's done something, it doesn't mean you have to stop being a Christian, but you stop giving to those people. You stop going there. You stop being a part of that. Find a new group. So if you're in a Roman Catholic and you say, look, I don't want to, you don't have to necessarily stop being Roman Catholic if that's not what you want to do, but I wouldn't give a dime to them. I wouldn't support the institutions that support the dehumanization of other people and justify the sin. Right. That's where it has to begin. But we don't have to reject our faith. We have to reject the abuse of it, the institutionalization of the faith, that makes the corporate more important than the individual. But biblical theology, the individual is always more important than an organization.
Right. It's very interesting because a lot of young people today are pursuing so-called collective ideas where they're choosing to emphasize the we nature or the together nature that we have in the country, and to use that to extract money and power from you, because they're claiming that we're a collective when the reality is the Bible sees us as individuals. Yeah, the body of Christ is a collective, if you will, of people. It is, but each individual within the body is to love on their own volition those others that are in the body. They're not compelled to. They're not forced to. But they do it out of their own will. And what I see when we move from an individual base where everyone is free and able to make decisions as they will toward a more collective understanding of these things, where there's some central idea that I'm not a part of, or central group or elite group who is saying what the collective must do. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. I think in our nation it's dangerous. I think it's very dangerous, and I think that's where we're headed. And even in the Catholic Church, it's a very interesting thing. There's an elite group within the Catholic Church that is saying
the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church. Historic confessions, Catholic just means universal.
Right. Catholic is the universal. But the Roman Catholic Church, there's an elite group of individuals, those cardinals, the people that are in the Sea of Cardinals, and the Pope, who are making these decisions. But each individual Catholic cannot feel connected to the Word of God, cannot feel connected to God Himself.
And that's kind of been a historic problem for the Roman Catholic Church. Anyway, the power, being power hungry and doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's unescapable.
But this is coming out. The victims are children specifically here.
Right. People who don't have power and need to be protected.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's just a fascinating shift that we're undergoing in so many areas of life. But Ward, I thought that you were tasked to stop all this. I thought that was what we were paying you for here. I mean, that you are the apologetics and philosophy guy. You're supposed to be espousing ideas to prevent this cultural shift. What's going on?
Job opening.
We need to replace that guy. We need to replace him.
Yeah, I didn't see that in my
job
description.
Personally stem the tide.
Yes. You're supposed to be
awkward. So hey, I would give him the proper armament and legality. So, but I didn't know it was illegal to shoot.
Okay, we'll have to. We're going to reverse that later.
We'll cut that out.
Let's just say I have a very little
tolerance
for no for a pedophile. I was talking about pedophiles. So
so you would need the legal recourse in the armament.
Well, unfortunately, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled against capital punishment for child molestation. So about 10, 15 years ago or so, and I was not happy that they did that. So anyway,
so. Just in the last few minutes, and this idea that group identity over individual identity, I think that's the pervasive thing within the culture.
And we've seen the effective groups. We talked about that. The effective groups on identity.
Yeah, we talked. I mean, I'll just a couple quotes because I mentioned this story last week, and I said we'd come back to it. I'll just read a couple quick quotes, but we need to circle it back to the church. What we need to do better, but just as an illustration again, where talking about campus identity politics are leading to racially self-segregated dorms and parties. It says here, ironically, And the campus culture rampant with identity politics has only reinforced social divisions and discouraged integration. Mm-hmm. So they talk about going up to like in Boston and some of those liberal universities, when they say you go into the cafeterias, and most often black students will be sitting together while nearby tables are filled with white students. This is voluntary, but it's sad to see such self-segregation. Campus housing isn't much better, as many Asian students choose to live in one area together on campus for no real reason. In 2016, California State University stirred up controversy when the college unveiled a special Black Living Learning Community, designated as a space for mostly black residents. University of Connecticut boasts something similar called a Scholars House, where African American students will be prioritized in selection. Some would blame, the article goes on to say, the diversity itself for this division, but they're missing the point. Diversity is a good thing. It's actually identity politics laced campus initiatives that are driving students instead. So it talks about the microaggressions that come up, saying that even, anybody, we're all born human and all the kinds of things that could be microaggressions. We're all people, we're all one race, those kind of things. But that sort of group identity, again, is more significant than individual identity. Value comes in groups, not in individuals. Mm-hmm. That's, I think, what has happened in the Roman Catholic Church as well, is these little children who were molested, and some, again, were teenage boys, too. They weren't just all, whatever. So some of us more homosexual or heterosexual adult with teenage kids, mm-hmm. but some of it was younger, obviously. These are, what they've done is they've saying the group Roman Catholic is more valuable than the individual who was abused.
Right.
And I think that's, for me, the starting point for some of where we have to distinguish ourselves in our ethic and in our way we treat sin when we come across it, is our goal is not to protect the institution of a church.
Let me ask you guys this. Yeah. Let's say that you're a senior pastor of a church, and I'm saying here's a senior position, so now you have the Pope position, and someone came to you and said, some children have been molested in your church. This is under your direct leadership, direct or indirect leadership. How would you respond?
And the pastor's unaware.
A pastor's been unaware.
But somebody in the leadership.
But you find out one of your leaders has been molesting children.
Mm. Oh, I'd report it in a hot second.
He going to jail.
Wouldn't that crush your heart?
Yeah.
And crush your soul?
Devastating. And I, like the Pope, would fear that would harm the reputation of the church, so to speak, because those Christians can do it. But again, my job is not to protect the reputation of the local body. It's the church universal.
You go to those personal persons, and you find out what you can do for restoration.
The church is a family. That's the thing. The church is a family, and I don't protect anybody by allowing one family member to abuse another family. Yeah. The only way to protect the family is to cut out the one who's doing the evil.
Absolutely.
And that protects the church.
Mm-hmm. This is what we see all throughout Scripture. God calls people out. No, I didn't say call. I mean calls. Like C-U-L.
Calls.
Like C-U-L-L-S. Calls
reaping.
Right. Okay. Calls people out of the body of Christ. Yeah. Paul does it in Galatians when he's talking about the Judaizers who sought to enslave the Galatian believers. John does it in the sense where he ensures that we know the type of people that the Pharisees were in his writings and how they themselves tried to lord the authority over the people. And Jesus does it in Matthew where he calls them, you brood of vipers, where he segregates these false teachers, these false, people, leaders with those who obey God. So we would need to do the same thing. We would need to point out the fact that this is sin, and look, we're going to pray for you, and we're going to come alongside you as a church, because that's our obligation to you as you walk through this thing. But rest assured, by the
I'll come visit you in jail while we counsel you.
By this afternoon, you will be either running from or running with, the cops. You are, because
might pray for them to
the only black eye that the church is going to get is us covering up your sin.
The only black guy the church is going to get?
Black eye.
No, black eye. You need to enunciate. I thought that was another issue.
No, see, what ends up happening is, when I say words and then there's this thing that goes on in your head.
I just said enunciate.
Black eyes. The only black eyes that the church gets is when it fails to live up to its identity. And
bruising. It's called bruising.
Yeah, bruising. Yeah. Well, you said earlier, the Roman Catholic Church running like a bunch of gangsters, but there's gangster popes in the Roman Catholic Church,
and they always have
gangster popes in the Protestant Church.
They always have.
They just have smaller audience.
Right.
They have less money.
And Jude tells us that we ought to expect, these blights in our love feasts, these rainless clouds.
Yeah.
Jude tells us all about
the book of Jude. You're saying the book of Jude in the New Testament.
Yeah, it tells us all that we ought to. Paul told us, "I never ceased warning you with tears about these ravenous wolves who would come into your midst, seeking to make merchandise of you." I mean, so we just need to deal with them and love them. I mean, love them for their soul's sake. Absolutely. But as far as the law is concerned, hey, my hero, one of my heroines in the faith, I mean, just an awesome lady. Can't wait to see her and meet her. Hope we get to meet her in heaven. Is Carla Faye Tucker. Carla Faye Tucker was a young woman in Texas who killed an old lady with a pickaxe in her house in a drugged out stupor. But she was there, and she murdered that old lady with a pickaxe. Subsequently,
Carla Faye drugged out.
Carla Faye she was drugged out, but she was the one who did it.
She's the one who did it, yeah.
So she got arrested.
One of your heroes?
Yeah, watch. Well, listen.
I know, I'm just teasing.
I know he's going somewhere with this. At least I hope so.
She got arrested
and
went to court and got the death penalty. And you know what she said when she got the death penalty? I deserve this. I did this. This is the crime that I committed. And she confessed. But between the time they enacted the death penalty, she starts to minister to ladies and people in her church. She's a genuine believer, so much so that James Dobson and all these other people got involved.
That's why her name's familiar.
And went to George Bush to try to get clemency. She wouldn't even get involved with the clemency deal. And even after the clemency was failed, I mean, she was still joyous. She was going to heaven. And I remember her story so well because I thought to myself, this woman is about to be crossed out. I remember, and it's so interesting, is I remember her family, the woman who was killed, her son and daughter were interviewed. And these guys were, I mean, they looked worse than she did. They had every right to demand justice. I'm not mad at them for demanding justice. But they could not see that this was a changed woman. All they really wanted was vengeance, and I can, I'm not mad at them. I'm just saying when you look at the comparison between the two, that really stood out to me, that this woman really believed, was willing to go and pay the ultimate price for what it is that she believed. And I totally respected that, and I think if you do a crime like a priest who does that, it is your duty as a Christian to go and confess to the courts and say, here's what I did.
Yeah.
And whatever penalty comes from
penalty comes. But that's the way to protect the true church.
Yeah. It's exactly
not the
right.
institution of it.
Right.
And I think that's it.
And I never forgot that.
And never forgot that. A couple minutes. Well, I think we're out of time on our show for today.
Ward wants to shoot and kill people.
Well, hero's a pickaxe woman, so I'm a little concerned. Please pray for my safety this week. I never angered. Now you know, Corey, why I never have disagreements on the show.
Moses was a murderer, and Paul was a murderer too.
I think you're forgetting that's not the reason they were heroes of the faith. That's just
in the same way, Carla Faye would. She's not a hero because she's a pickaxe.
I think you're lionizing the wrong aspect.
I think Joe is being a little facetious.